Yo, what up, what up? It's your man, Big Brandon Carter. I have something embarrassing that I want to admit to you guys. About a year ago, my business went through some real changes, and it got very hard for us economically, and it was stressful. Like, some business deals didn't go through, and some stuff we were dependent, like, you know, when it rains, it pours. And we were like in debt, and it looked like we were about to go out of business, and I was like crazy stressed out. At that same time, I was reading a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And I can safely say this book changed everything. I used what I learned in this book to turn our whole business around, and we ended that year doing way better than we started. And I continue to practice what I learned in the book, and we've actually, close to tripled the revenue we did prior to the crisis, right? And it's all because of what I read in this book. And it changed my life. I made my whole staff read it. I recommended it to all my friends. I was fortunate enough recently to do an interview with the author. You're gonna have to forgive me, because in this interview, I'm a little giddy, like a high school girl who just met a Kardashian or something. But he just had that kind of impact on me. And the stuff I learned from the author in the interview was even better than the stuff I learned from the book. I mean, in addition to what I learned from the book, I don't recommend the interview as a supplement for the book. I think you need the book as well. It's going to help you a lot. So without any further ado, I am proud and honored to bring to you my interview with the great Cal Newport. What's going on, guys? We are here with one of my favorite authors, Cal Newport. He's a computer science professor, but he also writes some amazing books, including Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, which is one of my favorites, but one of my favorite books of all time, Deep Work. I'm really excited. Thank you so much for joining us, Cal.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So before we even start, I mentioned it briefly before we got on, but this book, I don't want to say it changed my life, but I guess it did, right? It changed my life and my business. Like, all my employees, we read it. We have actual deep work times in the office, right? Like, where like people can't interrupt each other and stuff. Can you tell us the story about how this book came about, how it came to fruition?
Yeah, it really came from two different places. So the first place was I had written this book before it called So Good They Can't Ignore You, which was about how passion in the workplace often comes from people becoming really good at something first, as opposed to they start with the passion and then that leads them to the thing they get good at.
Right.
And so I published that book, and some people said, okay, I get it, I buy it. So how do we do this part where we become really good at something or build up these skills? And in some sense, this was a response to that. It was also a response to what was just going on in my own life. I had been hired right around that time as a professor. And so I was curious, how do I do this at a very high level? I mean, how do people in a cognitively demanding job, how do they get there? How do they get there at a high level? And the more I looked into that, the more deep work also seemed relevant. So those two things came together, and I said, I guess I got to put this down into a book.
And you did. Like, so here's for some reference. I read about 2 books a week, and I've been doing it for like the last 10 years. And this book was the standout for last year for me, like the clear standout, and I marked up almost every page of it. It's amazing. How have the principles in the book helped you improve, and what are like some of the main? I know, but can you talk about some of the main principles in the book and how they help you and others, for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, deep work is my term for the activity when you are focusing without distraction for a long period of time on a cognitively demanding task. So it's when you're just locked in onto something. And this is what you're doing. You're thinking about it hard, and there's no distractions. There's no glance at the phone, no glance at the web browser. This is what you're doing. And it had become clear to me when I was looking into this issue, 2 things. One, this skill is incredibly powerful. It's something that you can get better at. And as you get better at it, it can produce more and more value in quicker and quicker time. It's almost like a superpower in the knowledge economy. And the other thing I noticed was that we're getting worse at it. Because we're more distracted, because we have a lot of effort being put into making applications on our phone and sites on the internet very, very appealing. Our attention is more diverted than it's ever been before. So those two things come together is a huge opportunity. We have this skill, this ability to focus intensely, becoming more valuable at exactly the same time as becoming more rare, which means the individuals or organizations that really prioritizes, that train at it, that get good at it, have a huge competitive advantage they can win.
I get it. Because like, the Facebook and these social networks and these advertisers, they hire like the smartest people in the world and their job is literally to distract you. Right. And so like it's hard to compete with that, all this stimulus out there and everybody trying to get your attention. But and I get the argument from this book is that you need to combat that so you can get better at the things that are really important.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the key skills of the 21st century is if you can train yourself to concentrate intensely. It's an incredibly valuable skill that's also quite rare. But I use that word train very specifically because that's sort of the secret undergirding all of this, which is concentration is not a habit like flossing your teeth that everyone already knows how to do. It's just like, oh, I should spend more time doing it. It's a skill like playing the guitar or figuring out how to do a heavyweight deadlift. It's a skill that you actually have to practice to get good at. It's something that if you practice, you can get very good at it. But if you're not practicing it, you wouldn't expect to be very good at. So it has a huge upside, training your mind to concentrate intensely, but it has to be seen like almost any other skilled activity as something that if you want it, you're going to have to really train for.
See, I actually didn't. This is the first time I've thought about it in that regard as a skill. Like I just saw all right, this is what we're going to do, guys. Deep work, 4 hours. But it's actually, you're saying it's a skill, something you can develop and get better at it. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, I think the right analogy is probably to the fitness, right? Because if you think about an athletic skill that you want to get better at, let's say you want to be like a professional triathlete or something like that, there's going to be two types of things you have to do. There's the passive activity. So if you want to be a triathlete, you're going to have to start eating better and sleeping better and taking care of your body. If you smoke, you're probably going to have to start smoking, that type of thing. And then you have the active training, right? Like, okay, I'm going to go do this many miles on the bike, or I'm going to do this type of lifts to improve a particular skill. Same thing with cognitive training. Train your brain to concentrate. You have the passive things you have to do, which is setting up a lifestyle where your brain is not continually being pulled left and right with different distractions. It's the equivalent of the triathlete smoking outside of the periods when he's training. And saying, hey, I'm not in training now. What does it matter? And then there's active things you can do, which is actual activities to sort of push your comfort with concentration. Actual training activities you can do to push yourself a little bit more. This includes things like giving yourself very tightly timed intervals where you concentrate as intensely as possible in that interval with zero distraction. And if you glance at something, the whole interval is invalidated. And you say, okay, so what period am I comfortable with? At first, it might just be 20 minutes. And once you're hitting that regularly, then you go to 30, then you go to 40. And there's other things like that, which is just like training a muscle to be able to carry more weight. You can train your mind to concentrate deeper and for longer.
Because it's actually like very like mentally, like it's demanding, right? Yeah. To actually concentrate. It's when I do periods of deep work, I feel like I've worked out almost. Like I'm tired as if I worked out. It seems like the cognitive work is straining on your whole body. Is that accurate, or is that just me?
No, that's accurate. What you're talking about is very common. It's because the brain actually consumes a massive amount of your body's energy in order just to run. So when you're doing something like deep concentration, it actually can be really exhausting. It is a hard activity, and this is also why it can be really hard to convince yourself to start deep work, because your body in general, your brain in general knows if it can avoid expending energy, it will, because like this is how you survived back in the caveman days, right? Don't expend energy unless you see the tiger coming at you and it's clear that you need to expend the energy. So your mind doesn't really recognize, deep concentration on something you're writing as a danger or something that really deserves energy. So that manifests itself in day-to-day life as sort of a sense of mental resistance when it comes to time. I think it's the same type of mental resistance people get when they're new to weightlifting or something like this, right? Because it's going to require a lot of energy. You're about to expend a lot of energy. There's no tiger lurking around the corner, so you have to sort of convince your mind we should expend this energy for some more abstract goal. So it is time consuming. It is energy consuming. And because of this, at first, it can be really hard to even convince your mind, okay, hey, it's time to do this. But it gets easier with time. It gets easier to slip into it, and the level of depth that you obtain is going to get deeper and deeper the more you do it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've read that your brain consumes like 20% of your body's glucose, or something like that, in order to concentrate. It's like actually physically draining. But I've noticed, like, when I get a new employee, they may not be used to maybe how much we work here, and I have to take that into account, because I've been familiar with some of these concepts a little bit. Tim Ferriss mentioned some of it in 4-Hour Workweek, like similar stuff, but this is different. It's like more robust on that topic, and they get burnt out. Like they haven't. I have to remember that they haven't been doing this for like 10+ years, like training themselves to work in a deep state of concentration with no distractions. Before we get into how, I'm really curious about more of these techniques to expand your ability to work deep, but can we talk about some of the benefits? Like maybe some guy, he's not as familiar with it as me. What can you get out of actually like concentrated deep work?
Right. So as you get better and better at deep work, there's 2 areas where it really helps. So one area is learning complicated things quickly. So if you have some new complicated skill or task or idea or system that you have to learn, the more comfortable you are going to a state of deep concentration, the easier it is for a variety of reasons to learn that. And we know in an increasingly competitive knowledge economy in particular, the ability to keep up with all these changing ideas and systems and concepts very quickly is crucial. Like, otherwise you get left behind. The fields change so quickly, the technologies in the field change so quickly, the business models change so quickly. So it's a huge superpower if you can take this new system or idea or mathematics that you need to know for some sort of statistical model. If you can lock in and learn that, huge advantage. The second thing is, when you actually are working on something valuable, the deeper state of unbroken attention you can reach, the higher quality you're going to produce, and the more you're going to produce for each hour you spend working. So you take 2 people that are spending 20 hours a week on something really valuable, the thing they do best, and you have one person doing that 20 hours with deep unbroken intensity, and the other person doing that 20 hours more or less concentrating, but glancing at this and glancing at that, and not with full deep focus. What you're going to find is the deep worker is going to produce much more in those 20 hours, and the quality of that is going to be much more. And that's also, of course, really important in an increasingly competitive economy. If you're not producing like a star, you're going to be in danger of being automated or being outsourced or just eliminated altogether. So I see it as, and I'm quoting The Economist here, as sort of the killer app of the 21st century knowledge economy. If you can do this concentration, you can play with this new economy. If your mind is very scattered, you should be a little bit worried about what's going to happen in the years ahead.
Oh man, and there's so many examples in the book of why that's important, and to corroborate what you just said. I've noticed it so much, in just the improvement since we've got the book, and so I read it and had my employees read it, and we do things like deep work time in the office. I bought some of the guys noise canceling headphones so they can't be distracted. I have some, and we sit and work, and I just noticed the productivity in our level of how much we accomplish is way more than a lot of people in our same field. Like a lot of people ask me, how do you accomplish so much? How do you get so much done? Because they see something, and I'm telling them, man, it's this. Yeah. Like, honestly, it's this, and you're not paying me to say this or anything. It's just, I'm just a big proponent of what you said, and I'm not scared to tell everybody, because I know that everyone can do it. Why do you think so many people can't concentrate? Is it because the stuff we talked about earlier, or have we just been trained to do that with these apps and our phones and the constant stimuli? What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think partially we've been trained away from it, just because we do have a lot, not just stimuli. We've always had stimuli, but as you mentioned before, we now have billions of dollars of investment and a lot of really smart people making this stimuli very addictive. But to be honest, I think a big part of it is that we haven't had a clear conversation about this. We've talked some about, distraction makes us a little nervous. We feel like we're more distracted than we used to be, but it's an ambiguous conversation, because the things that are distracting us are not evil. Like, they have value. I mean, there's something I see on Facebook, or maybe there's something I see on this website. And what I try to do is flip that conversation and say, okay, forget for now whether distractions are bad. we haven't talked enough about what's so good about their opposite. And I think in modern knowledge work, because it's so new, we've mixed a lot of different things together. And if you re-separate those things and say there's two type of efforts you do in modern knowledge work, there's the deep stuff, which is when you're trying to do the thing you do best at a very high level and produce something that's new and rare and valuable, that's going to create something valuable in the world. And then there's shallow work, which is everything else, which is not bad and it's not evil, but it's also not producing a lot of value. It's the talking about work. It's the having the meetings and sending the emails and moving information around. And that has to happen. But that's different than the deep work, because no one ever made a fortune by being quick at sending emails. But you can make a fortune by honing a craft. And I think once you separate those two things, it becomes much more clear, oh, the deep work stuff is where the value is made, so I have to prioritize that. If you don't separate them, it's easy just to see the whole thing as work, and the more work you're doing, the better, and the more busy you are, the better. So part of it, I think, is just vocabulary. You put a word to it, you put a name to it, you say there's different types of efforts. Suddenly it changes the whole way people think about it. And once they recognize this is different, concentrating for 3 hours on this thing I do really well is different than cleaning my inbox. Then they're much more willing to say, maybe I need to work on that other piece. And I think even the most sort of immersed in distraction type of person finds it's not too hard to come out of that and get good at the concentration. They just didn't know before that was something they should be doing.
Now that's wildly important, because I see people working and they're going through Facebook or they're on the phones and they're supposed to be working on something important, but what they don't understand is multitasking. You talk about it in the book, and I've known this for a long time. Multitasking is a myth. Like the multitasking is it can be dangerous, right? Can we? I think that's a problem. Like people have put so much. They've assigned so many positive attributes to multitasking, but I think it's actually a negative thing. I wondered your perspective on that. I kind of know what you're going to say, but I want you to tell them.
I'm not about to say we need more multitasking. I'm checking my email right now while we talk.
I'm editing a video on the screen.
No, I'm 100% with you on that. And here's what I think happened. Back in, let's say, the mid 90s, when a lot of sort of digital communication technologies went widestream, people were big on old-fashioned multitasking, where they'd have multiple windows open at the same time. And a lot of research came out that said that doesn't work. You're just doing all those things worse. And people sort of heard that. And so they say, okay, I don't do that anymore. I single task now. But what they're doing is maybe they're more or less working on one thing. So they have Microsoft Word open and they're writing whatever they're writing. But every 5 or 10 minutes, they do a just check. Let me do a just check on Facebook, a just check on my inbox, just check on my text messages. And they think they're single tasking. But we now know from new research that that's just as bad, that every time you do one of these just checks, it can leave a cognitive residue in your mind that slows everything down, that gunks up the works for 10, 15, 20 minutes later. So this new way of working where people think they're single tasking because they don't have multiple windows open at all times is just as bad. So just little checks here and there can be just as bad as having the inbox open next to the thing you're trying to do. So that part of what makes deep work is this sort of obsession I have with it doesn't count unless it's the only thing you're doing. And even a quick check on your inbox means that's not deep work. And that's why it can be just as bad as multitasking, even if you're just checking things quickly along the way. I mean, deep work means nothing but what you're doing. You give yourself the time to get into it, to load it up, to be doing nothing but it, to fire up the mind, to start getting 100% return. It feels like nothing else. The type of stuff you produce when you're in that state, that type of cognitive runner's high, is like nothing else in the world of sort of cognitive work.
No, you're totally right, because it's what people don't understand is that when you switch tasks or do a just check, like you just called it, I like that. Your mind has to acclimate to this new task, and it takes a while for your mind to acclimate to that new task, and then you go back to the other thing, and your mind has to acclimate to that, and you lose so much time in those gaps. Right? You never really. Because from my experience, the more you concentrate on something, like it kind of just ramps up, and you start getting into like a flow. But you can't reach that if you keep going back and forth, right? And things just take longer and are less fun and less it's just less effective. You're less productive. But when I get into one of those zones like you're talking about, then I can get a lot of work done.
Yeah.
I can get, and it's not as draining, you know, like, have you had this experience? I'm kind of, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking, forgive me if I get too excited, because I feel like I really I hold you in high regard, you know, after reading this book, you know. And do you have this experience when you like start something, you might dread it, like you talked about, like, oh man, I know this is going to be, but once you get in it, it's like you don't want to stop. Is that normal, or is that just me, my spaz, or that, like, is that a result of deep work?
That is incredibly common. I mean, so if you study people who are adept at deep work, who prioritize deep work, they'll talk about this experience. They love this experience. It's a challenge. Yeah, it's hard to get into. Your mind's resisting, and then things start to click into place, and the blinders start to click into place, and then an hour into it, suddenly you're going on all cylinders.
Yeah, you don't want to stop.
Team connection, you're making progress, and it feels really good. And it's like what I like to emphasize when I talk about it is, deep work is not about being a little bit less distracted or a little bit more productive. I mean, I want to emphasize that the experience people have when they take this seriously is not they're a little bit more effective. It's massive increases in productivity. I'm talking about they're producing 2 or 3 times more than they've produced before, that their career path accelerates at a fast clip. And so it's not about, it'd be nice to be a little less distracted, or, hey, you know, maybe I'd produce a little more if I was a little less distracted. It's like a completely different type of working. It's almost not fair. If you're someone who's locked in with the deep work and someone else isn't, they think that you're some sort of superhero. Like, what? How is this going on? I don't understand, Brandon. Did you not sleep? Like, when are you getting this work done? And people don't understand that it's like an elixir of productivity. It's not just a little bit off the top.
No, totally. Like, I used to do the Pomodoro Method. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, where it's 25 minutes, you know, of work, and then 25 minutes of distraction. And that was cool. That was cool. I had some, but I couldn't get it. That wasn't enough time for me to get into to this flow like we're talking about. Like, I want almost 4 hours. Yeah. Of deep work. If I'm doing deep work 4 hours, because I feel like it really takes me an hour to really get going. Is that normal, or do I need to get, or is there things I can do to improve it? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely normal. The minimum that I usually recommend is 90 minutes is sort of at the bottom end of the scale, because it's going to take about at least 20 minutes or so just to get reasonably cleared out all of the residue from other stuff that's going on. So if you're only working for an hour, for example, by the time you even get going, you only have 30, 40 minutes left. You're almost wasting all the effort you just made. So you think about the overhead you go through to clear out all the residue. And if you're doing something hard, then it might take you another 20 minutes, really just 30 minutes, just to get all the pieces in place. All right, let me understand this challenge. What are the variables? Why do the obvious things don't work? And now you're an hour in, and now you're ready to actually start doing some cognitive damage. You're ready to actually have some smart insights and produce some stuff. And so that's when you don't want to waste it. You've just spent 30 to 60 minutes overhead getting going. So 4-hour chunks, not at all uncommon among people.
Yeah, I like
these skills.
Yeah, I need at least, like 2 doesn't feel like enough. Like that, I don't, this almost feels like a problem. Like, it's just, I don't know if it's like holding me back, because I have some projects I need to do, but I'm like, man, I need 3 or 4 hours for that, you know, like where other people might chop at it a little of a day. I'm so used to this, I don't want to do that, because I just know it's not going to be as effective. Is there a way to, I guess we can talk about some of the ways that you can get better at deep work, or do I just need those 3 or 4 hours and that's just what it takes?
I think you should hold on to commitment to these longer swaths of time. And the real question is, how do you make sure that you're able to consistently get these long blocks of times is the right way to think about it. And there's a couple best practices.
Oh, I would love to hear.
Yeah, that works really well. So
get my pen out, man.
So if you control your own time, so you run your own business or have a lot of autonomy, something I found very useful is you schedule your deep work time on your calendar in advance, like any other meeting or appointment, and you treat it like any other meeting or appointment, right? So if you have a doctor's appointment on your calendar Thursday at 12, and someone tries to schedule a call Thursday at 12, you say, oh, no, I've got an appointment. We'll have to do it later. People are fine with that. You treat the deep work the same way.
Treat it like really schedule it, treat it like an appointment.
But what you got to do is you got to get out in advance of all these other things that show up on your schedule. So I found myself, for example, I go 4 weeks out. I have
Oh,
deep
wow.
work scheduled on my schedule 4 weeks out. That's the only way. If I wait, I used to wait and be like, when I do my weekly plan, let me put my deep work on there.
Yeah.
I've lost the unbroken blocks if I wait till the week of, because someone says, hey, 2 weeks from now, can you do a call at 10 on Monday? And you say, well, I can, right? At that point, like, I have nothing scheduled till the afternoon. Let me put it on there. And you do this, and you get to the week, and now you have just enough things scattered throughout your days that you don't have any long unbroken blocks left. So you plan this time up to 4 weeks out. Even if you don't know then exactly what you'll be doing for it, it preserves those blocks. And it doesn't actually eat up more of your schedule. It just forces you to be a little bit more consolidated about other things. So maybe you still do the same 10 calls 4 weeks from now, but they just happen to be squished in a little bit more into this half day that was open, that half day is open, and leaving time completely unbroken for deep work. So that's one thing I recommend, is get it on your calendar, treat it like an appointment, get it on there way out in advance before you start letting that time be spoken for. The other thing I recommend is, if you work for someone else, have the conversation with whoever your supervisor is. So, if you're one of Brandon's employees, schedule this conversation with him now. But be wary, because he schedules his time 4 weeks out now. So
4 weeks from now, you can schedule.
4 weeks. Exactly. And have the conversation and say, okay, here's what shallow work, my ratio of deep work to shallow work hours be in a typical week. And there's not a set answer to that. It depends on what you do. It's an actual very legitimate conversation to have, and it's a non-trivial one. Once you've had that conversation with whoever you work for, then say, great, let me measure and see what ratio I'm actually hitting. And if you're falling well short of that ratio, then you can have this conversation. What should we do to change this? This can lead to a lot of changes to company culture and policy in a very positive way, in a way that's not in response to complaints about distraction, but are instead trying to make a good thing even better. And I have a lot of reader case studies who've been coming in since this book came out, of people who were in cultures that they thought were going to be permanently requiring constant distraction communication. It was the culture of the company. They had this conversation. The next day, their schedule, the expectations in the company had completely transformed into something to preserve deep work. So those are my two suggestions. Schedule this on your calendar, and if you don't control your own time, talk to whoever does about what that ratio should be, and keep that conversation ongoing. Are you hitting the ratio? What do you need to do? What could the company do? What could the organization do to help you hit that ratio? You'd be surprised at how much flexibility there are in these modern work cultures.
This is awesome. This is awesome. Are they, you know what? I wanted the difference between, okay, so I've been doing daily deep work. Like I haven't been the best at it, because I'm gonna change some things around. We'll talk about it later. I want your advice actually on some other things. But I do have it scheduled in my calendar from 8 to 12. But I've been messing it up by like talking to these employees and such. But like 8 to 12 is when it's supposed to be. But that's daily. Now, what about these long breaks that's something I haven't explored, but can we talk about the difference between like daily deep work and like long sessions?
Yeah, because I studied this. So I wanted to understand, what are the different ways that people who do a lot of deep work schedule it? And there really are actually different options. And it's important to understand there's different options, because some are better fits for certain jobs and certain seasons than others. So what you're doing is what I call the rhythmic philosophy of deep work scheduling, which is you have some set time every day or every week. This is the time you do it, and you just stick to it. And so the advantage of that is it takes a lot of the scheduling thinking out of your hands, and you get very used to the ritual of, this is when I do deep work. But in some positions, it can be really hard to do, because there's unavoidable time conflicts that are going to have to show up. And this can be the case oftentimes for entrepreneurs or business owners. I have this issue in my life as a professor. There's just, it's very hard to consistently preserve a certain block of time without exception, because there's just certain things that show up every once in a while that'll break it up. So there's other options. So there's the bimodal philosophy, which is you're either in a mode where you're doing no deep work. Hey, I'm open, the office door is open, like I'm just working on it. And then there's periods where you're off the radar for a day, 2 days, 3 days at a time, really just immersed in something. And so I profiled some people who've had success with that. And during different seasons and different things going on, they can shift between it. And then there's more of the ad hoc type, called the journalistic philosophy, which is sort of more what I do, which is I build out my calendar of when I'm going to do deep work and when I'm not, and it can look really different week to week, depending on what's going on. And it can also oscillate. There can be a week where I'm doing almost none, and then there can be a week where I'm doing a ton. And so it's sort of adapting to what's available. The bigger point being, there are different scheduling philosophies that all work. And so if one is causing trouble, you should keep in mind there's others that can work just as well.
Okay. I like that. I haven't tried like the bimodal, I'm interested in doing like an experiment where I work on something for like a 2-week block. Yeah. You know, there's some projects, so just knock out a bunch of projects in that 2-week block. I'm interested in experiment with that. Have you seen somebody doing like long term like that, like weeks or months, or even years? Have you had a?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can definitely see things at that scale. A great example is the technology development company Basecamp, which used to be called 37 Signals.
Yeah, from Chicago. I'm from Chicago, so I get excited when I hear about that.
Yeah. Yeah, Jason Fried's company. One of the things they experimented with is first they experimented with 4-day work weeks, which is kind of interesting through most of the year. And then they essentially took a month in the summer and made it a deep work month and said, basically, go work on some project you think is going to be valuable to the company. We don't want to see or hear from you. They took a whole month off, right? And he wrote about it, and I get into some of this in the book, but he wrote about it and the cost-benefit trade-off. And like, okay, you lose some benefits because they could be working on your existing projects, but the benefits, the cost that the company got from the innovation they produced during the month, brand new products that were going to generate a lot more revenue, more than accounted for it. So there's a lot more of this experimentation going on. I think, especially in the tech industry, where they're rejecting this notion that 9 to 5, you're always accessible, is somehow going to be the best way to get all the value out of these human brains that they're spending all this money to hire. People are starting to push back and say, I don't know if I'm getting a great return on investment if I'm paying all this money for this highly trained brain and then making it answer Slack messages all day long.
Yeah, I'm definitely. The whole days go by where I feel like I'm just responding to stuff, and then like, man, I didn't get any further. I just reaction mode, I guess.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like buying a very expensive piece of equipment and then running it at 15% of its capacity just because it's more convenient. Which is basically what's going on. It's very convenient if in the moment, if everyone is accessible all the time. So that means in the moment, if I need something from you or you need something from an employee, if you know that they'll be there, they'll be monitoring Slack, they have their inbox open, it makes your life easier in that moment. And because of that, we've sort of evolved towards this workflow in the last 10 years. We're like, let's just make everyone accessible all the time because our lives will be easier in the moment. The trade-off is it makes everyone worse at the primary thing that most people do, which is using their brain to produce new value. So it's this trade-off we made, the short-term gain of my life is easier if I just know everyone's accessible, for the long-term cost of all of these highly educated, highly trained brains are producing at a fraction of what they're capable of. And I don't think that equation balances out. And we're probably going to start to see some shifts as we go forward in sort of how people do business in a digital age.
No, I think you're right, man. I think you're right. I take that back. I have done like more today. There's been a few times in my life, not many, where I just checked. I had something to work on, and I didn't want any distractions. Before I was really familiar with the concept, but I checked into like a hotel just to work. Yeah. And man, it was productive. It was productive. I also noticed that I get the most work done on airplanes. I know you talked in a book that guy he like flew to Japan and back, or just to work. Like I totally get that. Something about planes. I mean, there's no distraction. You're in one spot. I get the most work done on planes. I'll pay extra for the first class just so I have room to work. You know what I'm saying? I feel like I get that return back. What are some other? You said there was training we can do. Like it's hard to replicate the plane experience on a consistent basis, and maybe not everybody's got the money to check in a hotel whenever they want. What are some other training things that people can do?
Yeah, and that's a good point about the money, because a reader pointed out to me recently that I had I call that the grand gesture method, where you do some huge grand gesture and it tells your brain like, hey, this is pretty seriously. And the two examples I gave was J.K. Rowling checking into the luxury suite at the Ballymore Hotel in Edinburgh, which is like $1,000 a night, and then I talked about Peter Shankman booking a $4,000 business class round trip ticket to Tokyo so he could write a book on the plane. And I realized, okay, these are pretty expensive strategies. So
Yeah.
fortunately, there are some cheaper strategies. I'll give you two suggestions that found productive. So on the active side of actively pushing your ability, I'm a huge fan of what I call productive meditation, which is a training technique where you take a professional problem and you go for a walk. And for whatever reason, walking is what works here. While you're walking, you try to make progress on the problem just in your head. And just like in mindfulness meditation, if you notice your attention starts to wander from the problem you're thinking about and wanders on to other things, you just notice it and bring the attention back to the problem. Nope, I'm thinking about this. I want to make progress. I want to make progress. I spent a period of 2 years doing this, sort of between my grad student period and my professorship period. And my experience was, at first, it's very hard. Your mind wanders all the time, and it's very difficult to make much progress at all on the professional problem. But it's like the cognitive equivalent of pull-ups. It's this type of thing that's really hard, but if you do it on a regular basis, you start to get huge returns, right? Like you start to get strong fast. And it's the same thing. You do this for 2 months, and you realize suddenly, hey, I can hold something in my head and make real legitimate progress on this in my head, just standing there or just walking somewhere. And it's cognitive pull-ups. So then when you sit back down in front of the computer, you find yourself able to hit much deeper levels, keep your concentration much more locked in.
There's no obviously you don't bring your phone or keep it on airplane mode or something, but that's a given, right? But like, do you have a pen and a pad to write down your ideas, or is it just all in your head?
All in the head. And then when you get back, you write them down. So it's part of, right? That's part of the training is like, okay, I got to hold these things in my head. I got to make progress. You can do this for almost anything. You can write, like I used to do writing in my head. Like you can I kind of get this chapter, this article to work. I do math proofs for a living. I'm a theoretical computer scientist. You can work on math proofs, but you can also work on business strategy. All right, what's going on? Like, let me just try to hold in my head all the variables I know, all the feedback I'm getting about the market and what people have told me. Now, how do I make sense of this? You start sorting it and trying to understand it and what's my conclusions, and you get better at it, and it's great. And you recognize it over time, like, oh man, I'm getting beastie at this. I can move things around. I could be sitting in the back of an Uber and moving around pieces in my head and making progress on things. It's a fantastic training exercise.
Cal, this is like blowing my mind, right? Because I remember reading that in a book, but I didn't put it together till we talked. I used to be a recording artist. I was signed to Sony Records as a rapper, and I got dropped or whatever. And but the last album I wrote, to write it, I would leave the studio. I swear to God, Cal, and walk around the block. It was like a big block, and I would just walk around the block in circles. Not even the music would just sit in my head, and that's how I wrote the entire just write like whole songs, and I go back and then write them down or try to record them. So this is amazing, like to hear you do that. I saw when my father passed, I saw a psychiatrist for a little bit of time, just because my father he killed himself with suicide, and that's a weird thing to go through. And so I saw somebody, and he's recommended walking for 30 minutes, like no phone, no nothing. And he said, man, you'll get some amazing ideas. And he was right. But I didn't concentrate like you're something. I just walked, and I would just get the most amazing ideas, man. Something about walking, huh?
Walking, there's something about it. And hey, if you can get in the woods while you do it, you get an even bigger multiplier. I don't know why it is, but if you're in nature and you're walking among trees, you can make progress on things that you've been stuck on for weeks. And so you got to think of walking as like the fitness secret of the mind. It's like my big secret. I've been pitching. Like, for example, I bet if you took the period right where you're finishing that album, where you're doing all that walking and thinking, and you sat down and worked on another cognitively demanding task, you would have been incredibly sharp at it because you're in shape. Your brain was going. It was ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in the zone, man. And like it started coming fast. The songs were coming faster and easier as I went. This is like 12 songs all in the head, and it was rap music, so there's like a lot of words. Yeah. And it was like it got easy at the end. You're totally right. I heard I was listening to some podcast, and Seth Rogen and one of his guys who's one of his writers, and they said I guess they were smoking weed with Snoop Dogg, and Snoop said, "Hey man, you guys go for walks?" And they looked at him like, "What?" He said, "Yeah man, walks. Like I do a lot of walking, and I just get good ideas, and I think." And they said they started going for walks because Snoop Dogg told them to, and they said it helped them write. So like, yeah, this is something it's been coming up over and over again, is walking for like your mind, not just fitness.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. So we got I'm sorry, man. Sorry if I got too hyped. Sorry if I got too excited about this. I apologize. Productive meditation. Was there anything else you said?
Yeah. So on the passive side, the sort of the general cognitive fitness is having your mind be healthy so it can do this type of deep concentration. I think an easy strategy. You know, I used to say more straight out, hey, just stop using social media for a while. People don't like that, so let me moderate that a little bit. You want the same benefits? Take the apps off your phone. Right? You're not just for a period, but you're not losing any access to the server. You can go right on the web browser. You can still get to your Facebook page. You can still see things. Right? So you're not cutting off any access. All you're cutting off is the ability of the app to sort of just grab your time and attention when you're on the go. Right? But you're not losing any access. This simple action can actually have a huge impact on your cognitive fitness, because what happens is if you have these well-engineered distractions on your phone and your brain gets used to the fact that at the slightest hint of boredom, I get a quick piece of relief. I get a shiny treat. I get something, click a hit of boredom, bam, there's something. It loses its comfort with being bored. It's Pavlovian. You've taught your brain, you feel a little bit bored, you get an interesting thing. Right? These things are too interesting. You're a little bit bored, you get an interesting thing. So if it's not on your phone, all that means is there's going to be a lot more occasions during your day. You're waiting in line or whatever, you're waiting for someone to meet you. You feel a little bit bored, and you don't have an easy way to give yourself something interesting, so you just remain bored. And what that does is it breaks that connection in your brain that boredom means you get distraction. Boredom means you get distraction. And that's key when it comes time to do deep work, because deep work, it's by definition boring in the sense that it's not a lot of novel stimuli. You're just doing one thing.
Yeah, no dopamine release.
No dopamine release, right? So if you've broken that addiction, then your brain's going to be much, much more comfortable with when it comes time to lock in and do some deep work on this thing. It's not going to be demanding, where's my dopamine, where's my dopamine? And as long as it's demanding, where's my dopamine, it can be really, really hard to, when it comes time to do the deep work. So it's surprising sometimes that like what you do outside of work can have this huge impact on how effectively you work the next day at the office. You just take the apps off your phone, and just so you can have an experience of being bored a dozen times throughout the day. That's all it takes to start to break that addiction. You break the addiction, your brain is feeling healthy again. It's ready to do the deep work when it comes time.
Yo, that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal because you know, what I've noticed, you know, just talking to a lot of, you know, most of my fans and followers are younger. They're late teens, early 20s, you know, some closer to 30s, but the majority are younger. And what I notice is that a lot of them have a real issue with being bored. But the problem is the ability to do boring stuff is necessary for success. Like you got to be able to make yourself comfortable with boredom.
Yeah.
You know, Green talked about it in the 50th law. There's a whole chapter on just boredom, you know, like I was like,
yeah, it's everything. I mean, so here's what I think the real problem is. Here's what's happening, and with the younger generation that I'm a part of, the internet is great, right? And what the internet can bring is great. And some of these tools on the internet, like Facebook or Twitter, these are really well engineered tools, right? I mean, these are, I'm a tech geek, right? I'm a computer scientist. I can tell you these are beautifully produced things, and they enable a lot of good things. The problem is not the internet. The problem is not these tools. It's the smartphone. The smartphone's what's causing a problem, because what happened was, if you look at the size of the advertising spending in this country, where did all the dollars come from? And it's because they figured out, hey, people have this thing in their pocket that we could put ads on, right? So it's like we could now put billboards places where we never could put billboards before, like when someone's in the bathroom or waiting in line at the bank. But the problem is how do we get people to actually take this out and look at billboards on it? And we say, oh, I know, if we make the applications really addictive, we can build up an addiction. Then people will, on their own, take this out and look at ads wherever they are. So now it's basically like we can have billboards everywhere where people are, and that now there's a lot more opportunities to advertise. But the problem with that is that addiction that's required to make that work is sort of frying a young generation's ability to be bored and to produce the deep stuff, the interesting stuff, the stuff that makes life meaningful, the stuff you can build a foundation on. So my thought is, I love the internet. I love these tools on the internet that they make possible. But be wary about the mobile billboard. You know, get out of that whole where, I mean, I get it. These companies need you to look at it on their phone if they want to bring the ad revenues up, but just, wait till you get to the web browser so you can be bored. And then when you're done being bored and producing something cool, then you can sit down and open up your laptop and watch, the latest Carter video on YouTube. And it's great. You get best of the both worlds. So it's because a lot of times this gets mangled together and you say, I don't know, I don't like how distracted people are. And it gets taken as like, wait, you don't like the internet? Like the internet does lots of great things. And so it's just the smartphone consumption on the fly. That's really the problem. You get rid of that, you keep all the benefits while maintaining your ability to actually use your brain to create things that matter.
You know what? I really like the strategy, but I'm thinking of ways to implement it. I have two phones. One is like my personal phone, or people have the number, they can call me or text me during it. But I keep it on airplane mode until noon. Yeah, I keep both my phones on airplane mode until noon. All right, you can't contact me because I'm trying to concentrate on something. But this phone is like the social media phone we use for business and live stream stuff like that. And I'm like for example, I might not turn this on for a whole day if I'm like working on something. Is that the same strategy, or you mean like just throughout my day I should like get in the habit of not using it, not being distracted, just be happy with the boredom, or get used to it? Maybe leave this at home or leave this at the office.
Or just be, or like during the workday, or just be more. You can just be more structured about it too. Like depending on your job, it's like, okay, this is when I need I'll check in at this point. I'll check in at this point. Or if like breaking news is, I was just doing an interview at a media company, and with the head of the big media company, the head of it, young guy, head of this whole thing, and he's like, I got to know about breaking news. But I'm thinking, yeah, but your brain is like this huge asset for this company. Like you can't just be on Twitter all day. I was like, you have a whole office, I'm looking at it outside of the studio, of young interns that want to prove their mettle and be here. You could just take any one of them and say, part of your job is monitor the breaking news on Twitter and come get me if there's something I need to know about, right? And you'd still get all the breaking news without wasting it. So there's a lot of things like that. But then I'm saying outside of work, the applications and stuff you use for entertainment and for just as interesting, it's the post or Facebook or this or that, just move more of that off the phone. And so it's like, hey, I'm going to sit down now and I'm going to catch up on Facebook and see what's going on. It's like an activity you do, like when you sit down in front of the TV, as opposed to something that can follow you and grab your time and attention at any point, because that's what builds up that cycle of dopamine addiction.
Yeah, it's definitely an addiction. Like I've seen, because I know people who they sleep with the phone next to them. As soon as they wake up, the first thing is, like immediately, like a crackhead, and I try. That's why that's part of the reason why I don't keep mine on the 12. I don't turn either of my phones on until noon, after I feel like I've got sufficient deep work in, or at least some. What I've noticed, and I talked to other entrepreneurs who like tried to implement a similar strategy, is the resistance from loved ones and family members. Like even my mom says, "Well, Brandon, what if I need to contact you?" And I always tell her, "Mom, you live in Pittsburgh. Like if there's an emergency, you should probably. I'm in New York. If there's an emergency, if you can't wait till 12, you should probably call the cops instead of me, right? Like I don't know, But what would your take be on that? Because I hear it a lot.
Yeah. There, a lot of that resistance comes in, and it's okay. It's usually what I tell people. It's so quick how quickly we change on these things. It's like you suggest to someone like, hey, maybe they should put cell phone blockers in the movie theater, so like you don't have to see the screens right while you're watching a movie. And people go crazy, like, well, all these emergencies are going to happen and people can't reach me. And you're like, it's been only 6 years since you've had a cell phone. You've been going to movies your whole life. How many people have died because they couldn't reach you? I mean, it's fine, right?
I mean, unless you are in fact Batman, right? Like it's probably not that urgent,
Yeah. So I know an entrepreneur who runs a media company did something funny. He said, okay, what he did was he gave his employees the cell phone number for his wife, right? Because he does these long cutoff periods. He said, if there's a real emergency, you can text my wife and she'll get me, because she's the only person who can reach me. And so you have access to him if there's a real emergency, but man, you better hope it's a real emergency, because you'd be bothering this man's wife. Yeah. And he said once in 1 year did anyone ever reach out to him through that way. So basically he gave them a way to get in touch with them during his deep work periods, but just made it a little bit difficult. And that was enough for people to realize. So I'm the same way. Look, I've never had a social media account, for example. and people assume that I must be like friendless and cut off from the world and it is loader. And I'll tell you, it's fine. I have friends. I know what's going on in the world. This stuff isn't as vital as you think. You can be offline for a while. You can ignore your text messages during the afternoon when you're working on something else. People get over it. People's lives go on. Like, people are going to survive. We're not all, EMTs.
Yeah.
Someone's life at line. And we're not sitting there next to the fire pole, like waiting for the call to come in.
This is the damn Justice League, right? Like, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
If you can't wait to get, like, I just keep it off to 12 and I kind of just trained everyone in my life to be cool with that. And if they're not, then maybe we just can't work together, This is important to me,
I'm with you. And it was actually Tim Ferriss who had this great line a long time ago about you just have to get comfortable with little disappointments. That, like, I'm just going to annoy mildly a handful of people every week. And that's actually like a really fair price to pay for the benefits you get. Like, the metric should not be, I want to avoid annoying anyone at any point. It should be, okay, I'm willing to kind of annoy some people mildly throughout the week that really need to get in touch with me and they couldn't. And there are some things that were missed and we lost a little bit of money here and there. That's okay. Like, that cost is okay if what you get in exchange is you producing stuff that really helps your company grow or really helps, you move ahead in your career. And so we got to just be more comfortable with I have to apologize to people more than I used to because I'm hard to reach.
Yeah. Don't be, if anybody can't wait till, I think that's reasonable. Like, if you can't wait till noon, then you're just a spaz, man. And it's like, it's not going to work. Our relationship, whatever capacity, is just not going to work. The social media thing was like difficult for me because me and my company, we don't make any, we don't really spend a lot of money on advertising. It's all based off all through social media outreach, the platforms I've built. But what I've done is I made the distinction. I said, all right, I'm not going to use social media as a consumer, right? So I don't go on the Facebook news feed and see what's happening. Nope, I got an app that only shows my page and what I'm posting, right? Or like stay off of YouTube, like consumer, right? Let's use it as for what it's for, to entertain, inform, and promote the company and help the customers, right? But not using it so much like a consumer, which is crazy advice for me to give because our livelihood depends on the listener, perhaps listening to this right now, to use it like a consumer. But they're not going to do it. Most of these guys aren't going to do anything, right?
Yeah, but that it's actually good advice. Like, it's what I often tell people is if you want to know how to use social media right, look at people who do it for a living. People whose job it is to do social media because they have structure around it. And there's kind of two ways you can use social media. One way is you can just sort of open yourself up to the service and say, I want to be a gadget in your machine. Like, take a hold of my attention and just start, shaking me like a dog chew toy until I'm so exhausted I fall asleep just extracting. Or you could use it like a pro, which is like, I use it. I have certain things I like to do on it. This type of entertainment, or I use this Facebook group is really important to me, or it's for contact with these people. You figure out how you use it. You check it in at certain times. You don't have it on all the time. Professional social media professionals don't have, their apps open on their phone all day, like checking things. It's their job. They log in to post their content, to do their things. Same thing. You have times you use it, just like you have times you watch TV. You use it for the specific things you like, but you ignore or block. Or I just wrote a post about this on my blog, how people trick out and configure Facebook. To block the stuff they don't care about, that's only there to try to steal their attention, and so they can just focus on the things they really do care about. And there's a whole community that does this. That's like, I care about groups and I block the feed, or I care about Messenger, and so I actually use Messenger separately, or I really curate my friends. All these things that people do. And so I like this idea that if you're going to use any tool, use it like a professional. Know how you want to use it, when you're going to use it, what you want to get out of it. Don't allow yourself just to open yourself up and be a gadget, because there's a lot of engineering. They want you to sort of just be aimless, because when you're aimless, they get more and more dimes out of your attention. They get more and more of your bytes of data, and it's a bad bet for you. The good bet is, I really like, these videos. I like fitness content. I have this group that's really important to me. So I go on most nights at 8 and I look at those things, and I block my news feed or whatever it is. Use it like a pro. And then you switch the equation around where you're getting more of the benefits than the company is, which is probably the right place to be.
exactly. Like I try to respond to a lot of my comments. I try to like just engage with it, but within a certain time frame. It's not like you can't just hit me up every day. There's no notifications on it. Like my phone, there's no notifications on either of my phones. Like it doesn't even ring. Like I don't want people to call me. Like I've kind of trained everyone in my life not to call. I don't even know what it sounds like when it rings or it doesn't vibrate, no notifications. It's only I have to check it. So when I do use it like a consumer, it's during specific blocks of time, like, or you can't just, I don't want people can text me whenever they want, but I have time when I respond to texts, or I have time when the thing is to not let it distract you and be aimless is what I try to do.
Yeah.
I found effective.
Hey, you're doing it right. People should take your example. That's the right way to do it. Do it on your terms. Don't ever let yourself just be open. Don't give your time and attention away to another company. Don't let another company decide what you get to pay attention to and when. That's like your most powerful tool, because we live in a knowledge economy world now. So your time and attention is your powerful tool. That's your craft. That's where all your skill is. Don't let a company over in California control what you do with that.
Definitely. I have heard, like, we've been on for a minute. I just have one question. I thought about it earlier, but I forgot. Like, so when I'm doing my deep work sections, sometimes I use the bathroom, man. But I definitely feel like I'm losing, like I'm switching tasks. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wrote a big thing about this recently because I get asked it a lot. In a long deep work session, like 4 hours, 5 hours, you can take breaks. In fact, you're gonna have to take breaks because it's too cognitively demanding at the highest levels to keep it going that long. But the key is they have to be breaks that aren't going to really derail the deep work. So I call them deep breaks. And basically the idea is you can take breaks, but what you don't want to do in the breaks is expose yourself to the types of distraction or new information that can derail your thought, right? So it's fine to go to the bathroom. It's fine to, you can look at information that's completely unrelated to what you're doing. So like for me, if I'm working on a math proof and like I got to take a 10-minute break, I can read the sports page. It's not going to mess me up. But if I instead look at my work email, that's complete. And I see a colleague asking a question about a different math problem I'm working on or something like that. It's too similar, and now I'm screwed. Or if I look at relevant news that's going to get me fired up. So I call it deep breaks. You take breaks, but you keep it calm. You keep your mind calm. If you expose yourself to information, it's just relaxing information that's completely unrelated to what you're doing. You can, like, fiction is usually fine. Like sports news is fine. Go do like a chore in the house. I'm going to sweep something up. Like that's all fine, but don't change your sort of professional context. Don't look at something else professional then you're going to start to hijack and you're going to lose it all. So you can take those type of breaks, and it's good to keep the charge up. You won't lose too much.
I've made the mistake, Cal, of like doing all right, I'll just take a quick little break. Because I keep my phone on airplane mode when I'm doing deep work, right? I think that's critical. I mean, unless you need the internet for whatever you're doing, but that's dangerous. But anyway, I made the mistake of turning my phone off airplane. I'll just check Instagram. Nope. I just do. If that happens, I just do Instagram.
Yeah.
Because I guess I don't know if it's because I've been in a deep work mode. Now I'm deep working Instagram and liking 1 trillion fitness chicks pages.
Yeah. Well, this should be the 3 rules basically. Like, one, for a good deep break, don't do anything that's professional. That's like kind of related to what you're doing. It's not the same thing. That'll derail you. Don't pay attention to anything that more than $100 million has been spent on trying to make it attention grabbing, because they're going to win that battle, right? So Instagram sold for whatever it was, $1.1 billion. They put a lot of money into making that
they did.
Attractive, right?
They did a good job.
And the other thing is, which we fixed, is don't do social interaction that could be left hanging, right? It's fine, like if you're, whatever, your friend's right there, your girlfriend, your wife, your boyfriend's right there or something, you talk to them. But we're really wired to be very wary about social standing and social obligations because, we spent so much time living in small groups, right? This is why, like, email or text messages, if something's left hanging, like you see an email from a friend or a colleague that you don't have time to answer, or you see a text message that you're like, I can't get into this right now, that really rankles our brain, because in our brain, that's kind of the same as like you're around the fire back, at the old tribal days, and there's someone standing next to you, like asking you something, and you're ignoring them. which was like the type of thing that was going to get you a club to the head back when you were a caveman, right? So we're really wary about anything that feels like we're ignoring a social obligation, that someone was reaching out to us. So that's the third thing you really want to avoid during a deep work session, is don't expose yourself to any social interaction that you can't complete altogether during that break, because your brain is going to be very upset with the fact that there's this text message waiting for you, and they're waiting for a response from you. And even if you know they're fine and they don't need a response right away, your brain doesn't buy it. They're like, no, it's the guy at the tribal fire standing next to you, and you're ignoring them, and that's an insult that's not going to stand. So nothing professional, nothing that has $100 million invested in making it attractive, and nothing that's going to expose you to like social interactions that you can't completely take care of in that moment.
I like that. I like that. No, that makes total sense. Like, you know, especially you don't want to leave any like open loops open or anything like that. Okay, one more question. Have you done any research on how like any like nootropics can improve deep work? Like, you know, a lot of people, there's a lot of modafinil or Adderall or reishi mushrooms or whatever. You know, have you done any research into that? Have you found anything compelling or scary in that realm?
So I mean, I know there is big communities that are big on various nootropics for helping deep work capacity. I'm personally very worried or scared about that field because the really strong ones, like the prescription strength ones, I've just seen too often. What happens is, it's just like with me and caffeine. So I've seen this in my own life. There's this thresholding effect where like you get this advantage at first, and then you adapt to it. And then once you adapt to it, now suddenly you need the Adderall, you need the Ritalin just to get back to your normal state you were before it. And then people get on these cycles where they can't function at all. So the really strong stuff scares me. And what I've observed is basically, if you're practicing, if you're training, you're putting aside good time, you have good nutrition, good hydration, you can reach really deep levels of deep work. Like, in other words, it's often, if the issue is I'm not getting there, I'm not hitting these levels of deep work, and I need like a nootropic to try to like push me into it. Usually that means there's 4 or 5 other factors that you need to fix. That's the real problem. I mean, our brain can do this. Our brain can give you more depth than you need if you set the other things in motion. So, I mean, I know there's communities who are big on it. I don't know a lot about it, but I've certainly seen in my field the strong stuff, the prescription stuff. It helps at first, and then you're in a hole. You're like, oh man, crap, I got to take this just to get back to the level 0.
There was a time I got prescribed Adderall for ADD, but they'll give it to anybody, right? Honestly. And I was taking it in work. I was like, man, my productivity is improving. But then, I just, did more reading about it. Like, oh, this is actually this is amphetamine. Maybe I shouldn't be taking this. And I stopped taking it. And I got like legit depressed for a week, because it hijacks your serotonin, dopamine. Yeah. And I couldn't, okay, this is pretty bad when you and I wasn't even taking that much. And I have a colleague who's in the tech field, and he like really he subscribes to the deep work mantra, right? But he's taking like a ridiculous amount of Adderall. He has to keep taking more. And I was like, man. So I definitely see what you're saying.
And the other thing about it is in the sort of the knowledge work arena, you don't need it, right? In other words, the point is that so few people are actually doing real deep work and actually giving like true unbroken concentration to things, that if you're actually doing that, it's like a huge advantage over what most people are doing. So it's very different, for example, than like professional athletics, where people are all training at the pros are all training at the height of their ability. They're all at this cutting edge, and a performance enhancing drug could matter, right? Because everyone's doing the top training and the best training.
Right.
In the world of knowledge work, people are terrible at training. That's the way to think about it. Most people are just so bad at concentration or this or that you don't need to push your maximum capacity another 10%. If you're just getting up to 30% of your cognitive capacity, like kind of respecting deep work, trying to do some of that, it's already like a huge advantage over 95% of your peers. So you don't, it's usually relatively easily right now. Maybe this will change when people realize this and start talking about their cognitive training like they talk about their sports training. But right now, what's holding you back is not like an extra 10%. Saying, hey, just prioritize this at all, and you've got a big competitive advantage.
Yo, I love it, man. I love it. Yo, I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, man. Yo, this has been really insightful. I've got a lot of wait. All right. one last question. This is personal, self-indulgent. I get here at like 8 every day. We have we have our morning meetings at 9 a.m. I feel like I'm just getting in the groove. Should I move that morning meeting to 12? I mean, I feel like after talking to you, hell yeah, I should. But if you say it, then it'll make me feel better.
Well, there is a real advantage, because this is the thing I've been researching since this book came out. Is I've been researching companies that have found ways to build work cultures where it doesn't depend on lots of unstructured communication all day. Where companies where people actually do a lot of deep work, and you don't need to be checking your inbox for it to function. And actually, a lot of these companies do leverage a morning meeting. And so first thing, right? The first thing to do, the morning meeting. And the advantage of it, though, is it allows people to actually do all their coordination for the whole morning in one spot. So then everyone can go off and work their whole morning without having to wait for 4 or 5 emails to get answered or to catch up on emails the night before. Everyone can just sit down and say, here's what I'm working on. I need this from you, and I need this from you. You're accountable, you're clear, you've structured your whole morning, and then everyone executes. So I think the main problem you're having is that you're starting your work before the meeting starts.
Yeah.
And so it's hitting you as an interruption. But if that thing is pretty much the first thing you do, that meeting, which it probably is for most of your employees, because they're probably not starting at 8,
yeah,
it has a huge advantage. Yeah, it has a huge advantage, because it means that at least gives them the possibility of being able to just work and work deeply for a while in the morning without having to, in an ad hoc way, just start sending off messages to figure out what's going on. So I see it come up a lot in pretty deep organizations. So you might be stuck with it.
Okay. I got to figure out a way to, maybe I need to come earlier, and I don't know, come early and get 3 hours.
I don't want to poison your mind on this, but I gotta say there's a whole subculture that's really big on the 5 a.m. I don't know if you know this subculture. There's
like 5 a.m. Yeah.
That do 5 a.m. to 5 to 9. And like they're done with incredible deep work before most people's workday starts. So there's also
they start at 5, or they wake up at 5.
Start at 5.
Oh shit.
Well, they wake up at 5, but they transition into work really quick.
I see it. Yeah, because my commute, like, because we're in Manhattan, but I live in Queens. My office here, man. All right, I'll figure that out. But
there's other ways. There's other ways. Like Tim Ferriss's approach is he does it on the other side of the day, 12 to 3. But then if you have to get up the next morning,
Yeah. I get most of my work done, best work done in the morning, just and I think most people do, just because willpower and all that stuff, decision fatigue. By the end of the day, I'll be out of it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, man. Kyle, this has been a real honor to me, man. I'm a big fan of your work. Without trying to, I don't know. I feel like a teenage girl at a Justin Bieber concert right now. And honestly, I'm a big fan, man. Where can people find out more information about you, your blog or whatever?
Yeah, sure. As they say, the 2 most popular types of people in the world are young pop stars and people who write about focus. So you can find out at me at calnewport.com. I have a blog on there where I write about a lot of this stuff. You can, if you're curious, you can dive in and get a sense of the type of things I write about and find out about it.
Sounds good, man. Thank you so much, bro. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take it easy.